Is what is Brit?
Like my
background?
camera? Is it? Yeah.
A little bit. I mean, comparatively, yes. And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to OWL by the Numbers, your one-stop spot for all things Fantasy Overwatch League. I am your host, Humbly Drunk, and tonight on episode number 7, we'll be taking a look back at Stage 1, Week 3, let you know who to target on this week's waiver wire, judge last week's fantasy performances, and get you prepped for the week in your unlimited draft leagues. Before we can jump into the agenda for tonight and introduce you to my co-hosts, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is joining us tonight on Twitch for our live show, and of course to thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So as you can tell, we are one man down. Edinar is not here tonight, so the thrashing of the Houston Outlaws is on pause? Question mark?
1 week. 1 week.
But joining me tonight, we do have my other co-hosts. First up, just like mere hours after we sat down to record OWL recap earlier today, is the belated birthday man himself, Blazing Bob. Bob, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. Kind of interested on what this 20-minute episode is going to be like without Ed.
20 minutes. I think like you're overvaluing that. I don't know if we can even cut that. But also joining us is my PIC in the Podcasters Fantasy Showdown. That is none other than Ramses. Ramses, how has this past week been treating you?
It's been going all right. I enjoy being the Mike Mayock to your John Gruden, although I don't know if you would want that sort of comparison on your belt. But it's been a good week. Houston won their game, thank goodness. And I'm still woefully inept at technology. I mean, just before we started, my entire PC shut down and I had to reboot for 5 minutes. So I'm still bad at this, but I'm getting there. It's been a good week. How about yourself, Totem? How you doing?
Hold on, though. We got to tell the story about what happened. Julian gets on the call and he starts talking and goes, "I'm ready, guys." Like, what's wrong with your mic? He's like, "What do you mean, what's wrong with my mic?" It was like some voice changer that his roommate had on or something.
See, it would have been even worse if you guys just hadn't said anything and then we just got into the podcast and my voice was like that the whole time.
Bob and I were talking about that while you were, rebooting. And I was like, there was no possible way I could have kept a straight face. Like, it was just too much.
Well, this week, I mean, like, it was pretty good. Like,
Sounded exactly like that.
That's pretty close, I'm not gonna lie. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump into tonight's agenda. So as per usual, Bob, let's go ahead and quickly run down what went down this past week in the Overwatch League. So what were this past week's results? Bob, you're muted.
I meant to do that. Just keep you guys in suspense.
Yeah, okay.
Thursday, February 28th, the Philadelphia Fusion defeat the Washington Justice 3-1. Boston Uprising defeat Seoul Dynasty 3-1. The Guangzhou Charge defeat the Florida Mayhem 3-2. San Francisco Shock defeat Hanzo Spark 3-1. Moving on to Friday, March 1st, London Spitfire defeats Los Angeles Gladiators 2-1. New York Excelsior defeats Toronto Defiant 3-1. Vancouver Titans defeat the Los Angeles Valiant 3-1, and the Shanghai Dragons defeat the Chengdu Hunters 4-0. Rolling into Saturday, March 2nd, Atlanta Reign defeat Paris Eternal 4-0. Houston Outlaws defeat the Florida Mayhem 3-1. San Francisco Shock defeats the Washington Justice 4-0. And the Dallas Fuel, the Boys in Blue, defeat the Shanghai Dragons 3-2 in one of the worst C9s ever. Moving on to Sunday, March 3rd, Toronto Defiant defeat the Boston Uprising 3-1. The Hanzo Spark defeat the Los Angeles Gladiators 3-1. The Guangzhou Charge defeat the Los Angeles Valiant 3-1, and the New York Excelsior defeat Seoul Dynasty 3-1.
You know, in that last one, Bob, I can't even give the Dynasty a map point. After, they didn't even gain a single map objective throughout the entirety of that series. That was really a 5-0 in my books. And that's what I'm going to count it as moving forward. But, we had a lot of interesting things that happened this past week between the matches. Obviously, the Atlanta-Paris game was probably one of the more telling matches throughout the week. We got to see, some pretty cool Zarya attack from Fran. We got to see Shanghai basically cost themselves a series against Dallas Fuel when they were in the driver's seat of picking up their third consecutive win in a row. That didn't happen, but, Shanghai has another opportunity at the Fuel in this upcoming week. But Julian, taking a look back, do you have any quick takeaways from the past week, at least in regards to the Overwatch League?
Well, I mean, I'm going to feel gross saying this, but if we discovered that there is somebody better than Fisher right now, and it's Mono, because Mono is coming out and crushing the league as far as setting what the standard for tank play is. But unfortunately, as a Mono owner, it doesn't translate that well to fantasy stats. I mean, he's been a great player on stream and in game, but I mean, checking at what stats were, I broke maybe 180 points combined with him. So it just goes to show that everybody who's on stage that does well may not necessarily translate to fantasy points. And Houston took a win. Especially main tanks. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of transition right now because we see which main tanks are really good at playing GOATs and which main tanks are still struggling with that communication. Also, get ready for the next 2 weeks because the schedules are going to be almost entirely different.
That is a good point because we are entering the end of the stage where next week a lot of teams are going to have a bye week, and this upcoming week there are a lot of teams that only have one game as opposed to two, and of course we'll let you know a little bit later on in the episode which teams are playing 2 games, so you can keep an eye out for some of those players for your unlimited leagues. But Bob, any other quick takeaways that you have from this past week?
No, I mean, not really. Just the fact that the LA teams are struggling hardcore, but Izayaki still seems to make fantasy points. So don't bench him just because the team's not winning.
He's doing super well right now. I am very blessed to have him on my squad, but it's crazy. He is the one linchpin that's consistently scoring very well on that team. Not even Fate's doing amazing.
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of that, too, is the main tank struggled in, and with Fate's case, it's more the bubble management from Kariv hasn't been top-notch. But that being said, Kariv is still putting up some pretty decent points. But between the LA teams, I feel like the fantasy value has definitely been heavily in the LA Gladiators' favor, really from top to bottom. Outside of the flex support position is pretty close between the two because Shaz and Izayaki have both been putting up some pretty monster numbers throughout this season so far. But with that being said, guys, we're going to quickly note, some of the guys that you might want to keep an eye on in regards to the waiver wire this week in this week's waiver report. So, obviously, week to week, this is just going to depend on what league you're in. Unfortunately, we still do not have any sort of pick rates across all of the community leagues, so it's kind of hard to kind of pinpoint who will be readily available for you guys. But, we have some pretty interesting changes that are on the PTR that could definitely make some pretty hefty shifts in meta once we get into stage number 2. And I know, Julian, you're going to plan on bringing someone up that might benefit the most out of
100%.
But when it comes to some of the people that I've been looking at, for Toronto, a lot of us were like, okay, what's going to go on with that support lineup after Neko came back from his suspension and Aid was putting up monster numbers as a main support playing Zenyatta? Well, we did get our answer here this last week, and Neko did start as a flex support for the Toronto Defiant. And then on that main support was not, in fact, Aid. They went with Roki, who put up 134.38 points for his best game with a combined total of 222.53. So I have to say, we were really feeling good about Aid. He put up some pretty monster numbers, and then they just come out with Roki, and that was their what Toronto Defiant called their final form. So if you're an Aid owner, probably can't be too happy about that decision. So if Roki is available, it's time to reconsider and look at picking him up. And if another support too that really stood out to me this past week. Speaking of the Fuel, Unco had a monster game. I know Fuel only played the Dragons this past week, but Unco put up almost 190 points, which is very good, even as a Zenyatta player when we see such monster numbers. I mean, on the high end, the Zenyatta games have been like anywhere from like 175 to 200 plus, and Unco put up those numbers this past week. So if he's overlooked, definitely take a look at picking him up as your secondary support. But bringing this over to you guys, are there any names in particular that are coming to mind for this week's sign-ins?
I would go Apply might be available in one of your leagues. He just turned 18. We were looking at it on Owl Recap earlier today, and it looks like he's going to continue to play, and so I think Apply could be a good one to pick up. Besides that, I'm just not really sure.
I think I was actually going to say with his DPS partner, I think if BQB is still available, I think he's a pretty good pickup. Also, I think that, I mean, if they're still available in your leagues, again, we don't have ownership rates just yet, but I would be very eager to pick up both Blase and Color Hex from the Boston Uprising, simply just because they're the only DPS on the Boston Uprising. So I think you're going to be able to feel confident that outside of this stage, when the meta shifts, they'll still be viable. And then the other one that I've been able to pick up in a couple leagues and I've been surprised with is Void from the LA Gladiators. We know that Bishu has been sick with some internal issues for the past couple weeks. In fact, on Twitter today, I think, or yesterday, within the last 24-ish hours, he said that even though he feels better, he's not playing for the rest of the stage, which is very helpful if you are a Void owner, since they play twice this coming week, first against the Atlanta Reign on Thursday and on Saturday against the Guangzhou Charge. So I think Void's definitely a very good pickup. He's been available in a lot of places, and I think that you can feel comfortable with him at least for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, something to consider is the meta is going to shift with the PTR changes. So look at those DPS that haven't been as lucrative, like the specifically Brigitte players. Look at those guys. If those guys are available in your league and they're going to start, you might want to pick them up early.
All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the player performances here in the last week as we take a look at whether or not we should vouch or slouch in regards to a couple of players. So, Bob, there seems to be a couple of teams that are very feast or famine, one of which is San Francisco Shock, who have been kind of probably like a top quarter team in regards to the Overwatch League. And then on the other side, we also have, Julian's team, the Houston Outlaws. So let's first start off with Architect. So Architect did not have the best week. So why don't you talk about what his performance was this past week?
Yeah, well, I would just say just stay away from San Francisco Shock DPS players because you don't know what's going to happen, and especially when the meta shifts, you have no idea who is going to play and who's not. Yeah, you could get lucky, but I would say the San Francisco Shock DPS might be the scariest DPS to own in Overwatch League Fantasy.
I feel like if you have Rascal right now, you could still start him. But I mean, just thinking about this, once this stage is over, what do we do with Sinatra? Is Rascal going to be in as much as he was this last weekend? We're going to have Striker back in the mix. I mean, who knows? Even Baby Bay might come back to play one map here and there. So it's definitely going to be a shuffle to look at. I wanted to ask you guys about my boy, my pride and joy here, the 30-year-old wonderkind, Mr. Cool Matt. Cool Matt played in. He played this week, but he only posted up 56 points. Now, granted, that was across 3 maps. I know he's been on and off with Spree. They even had them in together at one point. But regardless, 56 points across 3 maps. What do you guys think? You start? I'm not sorry. I take that back. You don't want to start Cool Matt. Vouch or slouch Cool Matt?
Definitely slouch. Yeah, I'm not sold on Cool Matt at all, and with the meta changing, like I just don't know that Cool Matt can play anything but Diva. I mean, I haven't seen it, so I don't know. Like it's just kind of depends on if Diva's in the next meta. You would think she would be, but she's had quite a few buffs throughout the start of this season, so I don't know. I think Cool Matt might be a droppable player. What do you think, Totem?
Well, I will say right now with the Outlaws, Spree is the better fantasy pick, just because Zarya's more times than not have been putting up more points as opposed to the Diva players. And in this meta that we're in the 3-3, Zarya's are the DPS in regards to the team composition. So Spree is just outpacing Cool Matt in basically every way that you can at this point. And even now, like, Diva isn't necessarily a must pick. We see a lot of these Diva players flex into other roles. Like we've seen Meko playing a ton of Sombra for NYXL. We've seen similar things from other teams out there. But, NYXL is probably the first one that comes to mind just because Meko has kind of been lights out with the Sombra, especially with his hack usage and the EMP. And right now, like, there's not much stock value in Cool Matt, so if you have him, I'd say yes, it was absolutely a down week, but he is not startable in this current stage with the way that things have been going. You can't rely on only playing 2-3 maps. You're just not going to get the point value, even if they have a good map average. And right now, Cool Matt just does not have that. But moving on, there is another tank out there that definitely did not put up the best performance this week. That was very reflective of just kind of how this particular match went down, and that was between the Atlanta Reign and the Paris Eternal. So, Bob, I know you and I talked extensively about this match earlier on. I'll recap, but in regards to fantasy performance, how did Ben Best do this week?
Not so good, but I can't really speak on Paris yet because they've only played 3 games. Like, so I'm just like, we're gonna get to see a lot of them this next 2 weeks, but they've only played 3 games, and I'm still just a little confused on what they are and what they aren't. But they also, I mean, they got kind of shocked by the Atlanta Reign, and so I don't know that you can really judge Ben Best on this 1 week.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I will say, like, that particular match definitely had a lot of shock value because we were expecting this to be a lot more competitive. And with the way that Atlanta plays the game, they were basically trying to force Paris not to run meta, which, when we did see it, came in way too late, especially on Temple of Anubis. And it just seemed like Ben Best was leading the lobby in deaths every single time throughout that series. And it really spoke volumes about where Atlanta is ranking right now in the league. But Julian, like, do you feel like similar to Bob? Is it kind of too early to judge the fantasy value of that team in particular?
Of the team, no, I don't. Of the team, yes, I'm sorry, excuse me. I think it's too early to judge Paris as a whole. Ben Best specifically, though, I think that there's already better tank options out there that you could feel pretty comfortable at least getting rid of him for a week or so. He's not going to be super valuable, although we do have to think about the fact that they do play 4 games across the next 2 weeks, especially in not week 4, but in week 5, where we only have games for 2 days. And they're one of the only teams that plays twice in that week. across 8 games? Yeah, 2 out of 8 games. Yeah, I'm rambling. But at any point, if you can afford to, I would say cut him. I wouldn't wholesale cut him yet, but if you need to cut him to get somebody else, go for it.
All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the players that had a peak performance this past week in Fantasy Overwatch League. So, Bob, let's go ahead and start with you. Which player do you want to highlight based off of their performance in Stage 1, week number 3?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna have to go with Luffy. I mean, Luffy from the Shanghai Dragons. Like, what? I mean, might even be available to pick up on the waiver wire in a lot of your leagues. So maybe check that out. But yeah, I would go with that, especially since it's from a team that really hasn't done much until now.
All right, Julian, what about you? Who are you going to nominate for your Player of the Week?
I mean, Bob took mine, but I'm going to say...
You took mine last week.
It's true. We all had the same person last week, I think. I would say now that Luffy's off the table, I'd probably go with it. For me, it's a tie because Toronto Defiant has been so good fantasy-wise the past couple weeks. And they have been, like, those players are consistently putting up high numbers in every single matchup. So as a Neko owner, I was very happy to see the results he put out. But if I'm going based off of pure stats, you got to go Ivy. Ivy was definitely a mid-round DPS you could pick up, and you could feel pretty comfortable with the value you got, and he's come in and just destroyed. He is putting up monster numbers. This week he had 327.79 combined, 196.45 for single game. So he put up some really good stats, and then we're not even in like his best meta yet. So we'll see how he continues to improve and continues to dominate the area.
Yeah, Ivy has really kind of come into his own throughout this stage so far, which I'm really happy to see. And Toronto, man, like for a mid-card team that, maybe we kind of overlooked a bit, kind of leading into this current season. Fantasy-wise, this team has been absolutely booming from top to bottom, which none of us really expected. So I'm really happy to see the overall performance that we have seen. As for myself, this week there are a lot of good candidates. Of course, a lot of the Zenyatta players, as per usual, put up monster numbers. Luffy had a good week. I know AimGod collectively put up like 377 points in his 2 games, which were monster numbers. Neko, as you mentioned, put up like 330. And Shaz has just been holding down the fort too, having like another 360 weeks. So really across the board, there's just been this level of consistency from like 4 or 5 players that have just kind of been a peg above the rest in regards to the point values. But for me, I don't know if I should just go purely based on points combined, but if I were to nominate anyone, I want to highlight AKM this week because he did put up 181 points in that series against the Dragons, and that is just one of those players who a lot of people have undervalued him as not only just a player, but also Fantasy Overwatch League, just because he is on that Zarya role that he's honestly not really known for. So to see him kind of transition from hit scan as opposed to being like a tracer specialist, who a lot of these Zarya players are, AKM has been putting up some monster numbers as Zarya. And on a team that maybe shouldn't have won this past week, he still put in a lot of work. And at this point, he's probably one of the best DPS2 options outside of some more notable names that might come to mind first. But across the board, you can't be disappointed in what AKM has been doing for the Fuel. And fantasy-wise, he's probably put up the best performances out of that roster too. So you can't knock him too much based off of his current season so far.
I'd agree. I mean, Unco notwithstanding, he's easily been the most consistent out of that roster. I mean, and as co-effect owners, we're definitely feeling what it means when AKM gets a full starting load. So happy for him. Good for him.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the upcoming matches for this week. So, as per usual, guys, we are going to take a look at an individual match for each day, and then we'll have two of our hosts make their pick in regards to those matches themselves. So, to start things off, let's talk about the Thursday match between the Toronto Defiant and the Chengdu Hunters. All right, so we have Defiant, who are definitely on the up and up, arguably a top 6 team in this current stage. They've been picking up a lot of momentum, regardless of whatever's going on with the main support pick for the team. But they have been looking solid, and you have Chengdu Hunters, who have been running a lot of triple DPS compositions. They tend to run a lot of Wrecking Ball, more so than really every other team in the league. I'll have to look into the time played to see if the time played for Amen is more like Wrecking Ball time compared to the rest of the league. I feel like at this point, it has to be extremely close.
I think so.
Which is crazy, because we're just not used to really seeing that outside of like what Mickey was doing stage 4 last season on the Brigida, when she was playing Brigida like 80% of the time, as opposed to like the average of like 20 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But between this match, you know, Hunters have looked okay. The Wrecking Ball strat that they run is very exploitable, and they seem to rely on using that strat more so than running a traditional 3-3. That being said, though, their 3-3 hasn't looked as bad, considering that that's kind of been their back pocket strat and not their go-to. But with the current way that these teams are on their trajectory, you have got to lean towards the Defiant's favor. I'm expecting them to cleanly take this one, and I'm expecting the 4-0 in this series. Ramses, what about you?
I'm right there with you. I think it's a Tyrant easy. Wow, I am
Tyrant.
so bad with words today. I think it's a Defiant easy win today. I don't see as good as Chengdu has been in flashes, and I think how cool their comp has been. I think we figured out that comp by now. I also think Toronto is a team that is very just disciplined and also very willing to not pull any punches. I think they're very prepared for this comp. I think they're going to do a great job. I predict same Defiant 4-0.
Pretty easy match to predict in this case, I would say. But moving on to our next highlighted match, let's move to the Friday game between the Paris Eternal and the Vancouver Titans. All right, so Bob, last week we kind of saw Paris get their asses handed to them. We saw a lot of off-meta picks, a lot of things, a lot of different looks really that are really strong against 3-3, and tried to make them swap off, which they refused to do. And now they are going up against the Titans, who are arguably the best 3-3 team, if not the second best, behind the NYXL. So in this particular match, Bob, who are you favoring with the Eternal and the Titans?
I definitely have to favor the Titans. They do have a really good 3-3. It could possibly be the best. They also have just team synergy, and I still just haven't seen enough of the Paris Eternal. Maybe if I had a game or two more from Paris, I could maybe give it to them. But as of right now, it's got to be Titans run away with it.
He's been waiting on that one.
I'm just shell-shocked right now because disappointment ensues with something that's going on in the Twitch chat right now because someone finished in second place. But I guess it's better than hashtag forever third spider. So there is that. But anyways, in this match, you know, last week we were riding the high of the Paris Eternal. We thought that their 3-3 would overcome the off-meta strats that Atlanta was throwing, and we were completely wrong on that. So, you know, I don't know if I could safely say absolutely Titans are just going to stomp Paris, and they're just going to, you know, use that aggression, use their expertise on the 3-3 when they have been running that composition really longer than the rest of the Overwatch League, just due to the contenders' experience that they had in Korea. That being said, I still am going to lean towards the Vancouver Titans in this one. I feel like Paris are going to come out looking better than what they did last week. Obviously, last week really threw them off. We got to see a lot of cool things from the Friends, specifically with the Zarya rooftop grab from above, which no one saw coming, but was set up perfectly by the broadcast team, which was fantastic. So props to the production on that, seeing that from his point of view. But I feel like Paris will take at least one map, but I am leaning towards the Titans 3-1 in that series, which would lead into our Saturday match, which, you know, everyone has kind of been amazed at the fact that LA as a whole only has one win between the two teams, and we are in week number 4 at this point. But there is a potential hope for the LA Valiant to move away from their owl emote meme of win 0 when they go up against Julian's Houston Outlaws. And I have to say, like, Outlaws have had glimpses of greatness, but then they've also looked really horrible, Ramses, at times. So in this match, you know, Valiant have looked really shaky. How are you feeling going into this match? Do you favor the Outlaws to come out on top?
We'll see. To be honest, I've learned with the Outlaws just to never assume anything is going to go your way, and then that way you're never disappointed when it inevitably doesn't go your way. I've also heard it said that this match we have Volskaya and Route 66, which are both maps that are not great for Houston. I know Route 66 especially was like our kryptonite last year that we just could not pull a win out on, no matter how hard we tried. So I also think it's going to depend on how hard they exploit our backline necessarily, how hard they exploit Raucus or Bonnie, whoever they decide to sub in at the last minute. And I don't know if Space is necessarily somebody who's big into diving as much as Note or Envy or other divas that we've played are. That being said, I think the other thing I've been thinking about is whether or not, I mean, Totem, I want to ask you this. If you're the Valiant, which game do you prepare more for in order to get your win? Do you prepare for Philly, which they play at the beginning of the week, or do you prepare more for Houston at the end of the week?
Absolutely 100% the Outlaws.
The win's that important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. At this point, just to be a homer, I'm going to go Houston. I believe in my boys, kind of, hopefully. What about you, Totem? What do you think? Sorry about that.
Kind of hopefully. That doesn't sound too optimistic about your chances, at least in your mind. I feel like I'm a lot more confident in the Outlaws than you are, at least in this particular match. And, you know, there's a lot to be said about the LA Valiant right now. And so much of it just comes down to, one, you know, Izayaki has put up monster fantasy numbers. That being said, his Transcendence usage has been very spotty. It's been coming in too early, and it's given these opposing teams too many chances at just getting a free Graviton Surge off. You can absolutely not do that against Spree. Spree's just going to come in, he's going to drop it, and Outlaws will hopefully capitalize on that opportunity, but you have the Outlaws that have been looking better, and in this main tank battle between Fate and Muma, Fate has definitely been under a lot of pressure, and the fact that Karif's bubble management hasn't really been on point, I'm going to favor the Outlaws to take this one. Now, I don't know what the map score is going to be, but if I had to put money on it, I think this one is probably still going to be fairly close, just due to the fact that Outlaws haven't necessarily been a consistent team performance-wise, so I feel like this one will probably go the distance, but I feel the Outlaws will come out on top 3-2.
Well,
it's
if
not
it
going to be
goes the distance, Totem, then Outlaws lose, because a map 5 means doom for them.
The inverse Philadelphia principle.
Yep.
I'm not going to buy too much into that, just because the LA Valiant have crushed their fans so much already. I don't feel like they would be able to seal the deal in this case.
Oh, poor guys.
It's been rough.
I also think I think also just bare minimum, Boink's a better Lucio than Cookie is. So I think that we have a slight advantage there. I think in this meta, we have a slight advantage. Again, slight. I never believe in anything with the Houston Outlaws, unfortunately. I agree. I think we're going to take it.
All right, well, moving on, we do have another interesting matchup to close out the week on Sunday, and that's between a team that has been looking more true to form, so to speak, in the London Spitfire, going up against the Shanghai Dragons. Now, this is going to be the Dragons' second game for the week, so Bob, who are you favoring in this particular match?
London Spitfire forehead. I mean, are you kidding me? Everybody is on this Shanghai Dragon kick. I mean, come on, guys. They won 2 games. The 2 games. Like they're not as good as everybody keeps thinking. Yeah, they did have a 4-0, but that was probably a fluke. I don't see them beating London, no matter how bad London plays.
Well, no amount of preemptive sandbagging, so to speak, like they use on Around the Payload tonight, is going to lead to a London loss here. I will say Shanghai, kind of without the Season 1 pieces, look more of, I'm not going to say like they're bottom barrel, but they're not quite at that mid-table yet in regards to where I would rank them 1 through 20 right now. They've looked better, but we're still not quite seeing all the pieces there yet, but they have been putting up good fantasy numbers. DM had a pretty good week this past week. Luffy has been looking pretty solid, but across the board, London have slowly been figuring their shit out. Like, it's very similar to what the Outlaws are kind of dealing with. You know, they basically subbed out, for the Outlaws' sake, they subbed out Coolmet. They've been running Spree mostly on the Zarya. For the Spitfire, they benched Birdrain, who wasn't doing so hot. They moved their Brigida player Prophet over to Zarya. Guard has been having some absolute monster performances on the Sombra. And all of a sudden, London Spitfire look like, I'm not going to say a championship team yet, because it's still too early to say that. But they have been looking a lot stronger now that they've gotten an opportunity to get their feet underneath them in this meta. My only concern is, you know, in regards to like playoffs, this might be a little too late for the stage.
Playoffs.
It's like 2 weeks.
Sorry.
2 weeks out.
But when you say it, I just have to do that.
I know. It triggers that emotion from you, and I don't fault you for it by any means. But in this match, I expect London to come out on top. I'm expecting a 3-1 offering for the Spitfire and the Dragons. You know, they had their 2-map win streak, and that's probably going to be the extent of it throughout the season. I feel like there's going to be another like hit or miss, feast or famine type team. But at the end of the day, they're not going to be the strongest Chinese team, either this stage or throughout the season. So I'm not going to say, you know, all hope is lost for the Dragons. They had their moment, but they still have a long way to go at this point.
They're already twice as good as last year. So,
well, when you start as nothing, you really only have one way to go. You can't get any lower than what they already were.
Yep.
But hey, I mean, it could be worse. They could be an LA team.
It's true.
Yeah.
We have one win to the name. It's been rough, guys. Like this season so far has just been like, you know what, guys? Just take your predictions, you know, throw them out the window. Like, you have teams that look great one week, and then they look like absolute garbage tier the next. And then, you know, there's just some times where it feels like they're not even up on the stage. Who knows what to expect anymore? But it should be an entertaining week of games. But with that being said, we're going to do something a little bit different and talk about the unlimited draft leagues out there. So, obviously, if you've been on highnoon.gg, you probably have noticed by now that, you know, we have pick'em leagues. We also have unlimited draft leagues where you can basically pick any player from any team to play. And this is based on the raw score. And so it takes collective stats from that week. So if you play 2 games, you get the point value from those games. So Ramses, I feel like it's important to note initially that this week there are, as per usual, like a certain amount of teams that only play 2 games. You have the Trundu Hunters, the LA Gladiators, as well as the LA Valiant both play 2 games. The Eternal, Shock, Dragons, Defiant, and Titans rounding out this list. So who are you eyeing at starting this week when it comes to your unlimited drafts? Because I know, based off the leaderboards, like, you've been doing pretty solid.
I've been hanging. I can't beat Ed in like normal fantasy, but like I can crush in unlimited. I'm currently, let's see, just let me I give my 5 seconds to brag. I am for the Owl Network Unlimited, I'm number 3, and then this one doesn't count near as much. But for the Outlaws one, I'm number 1. So take with that what you will. It's probably because I'm not starting all Outlaws all the time.
That's a good call.
My current roster, at least the one I've touched, I haven't done both of them yet. I like to do a little bit of a split just in case if I like fail really hard in one, I still can come back a little bit in the other one. So right now, again for unlimited, you really want to side with players who are going to put up good numbers but are also going to play 2 games. So right now, we've already talked about those teams. What I'm looking at right now is my current starting lineup is Luffy of the Shanghai Dragons, of course, as my team captain. Ivy from the Toronto Defiant as my first offense. Sinatra as my second DPS. I have Shaz from the LA Gladiators as my first support. I have my boy, my pride and joy, Neko from the Toronto Defiant as my second support. And then I have Envy from the Defiant and also Void from the LA Gladiators as my second tank. Right now, Void's putting up, unless I'm wrong, and I could be wrong, I've been known to be wrong, that I'm pretty sure he's putting up better numbers than Spaces, who would be the only other off tank I would consider playing in this lineup. I think I can't find him in here, so I'm going to assume 192 versus 263. Yeah, long way around that, sorry. But I have that as my starting lineup right now. I think Toronto players are a very good pick to put in for these unlimited leagues. Shaz has been, by and large, the most consistent Zenyatta as far as points every single time. He's also playing 2 games this week, so always put him in there. And then Luffy, again, great performances, 2 weeks putting him in. Same with Sinatra. Void's the only one I have any iffiness with, but again, I don't know who else to put in. I also, despite him not being here, I have our 4th caster. I have Ednar's lineup here to read to you guys. He insisted that we put it up so he could take credit for any wins that you might get with it. So I have Luffy, Ivy, Sinatra, Violet. I think Shaz. It says Shaw here, but I'm going to assume he says Shaz. Envy, and he also has Space as his last tank. What about you guys? What are you feeling for your unlimited rosters?
Honestly, I haven't been very good at this. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's been. I'm on like the front page of almost every unlimited team or league that I'm in, but all I'm doing is really just pulling up whoever did the best the week prior and just starting them. So I'm not the best person to ask. I'm kind of like, if you want to come in 3rd or 4th, that's a really good strategy to do. But I have not been paying as much attention to that as I have been pick'ems and the actual standard leagues. But
so he's taking the spider approach, 3rd or 4th best.
Yeah, I mean, there's like eventually it might end up garnering me the higher spot. Like some people get lucky early on, picking things, but really the numbers don't lie. So playing whoever was hot the week before is not a bad call.
All right, sorry, I had to respond to what Spider was saying in the Twitch chat, and I have to say, like, for the most part, for a lot of these pieces, Ramses, Edonar, and I do agree on. For DPS, I have Ivy from the Defiant and Sinatra. For supports, I picked Shaz and Violet. For tanks, I picked Envy and Janu. Now, Janu is really the question mark one for me. I don't really know who to put for that second flex tank spot, just because I know Void has probably put up more fantasy points overall, but I feel like the Titans are kind of entering a week where they're going to face higher competition, so I expect their fantasy value to see a stock increase across the board, and I'm hoping that's going to reflect in what numbers Janu is going to be able to put in. But, for the most part, these flex tanks have been pretty consistent, so there's a ton of options out there that you can use. And for the captain, I also put Luffy from the Dragons. So it seems like across the board, we see these like Zenyatta players that are just posting like 170 plus point averages or 160 plus, which is a pretty good volume in regards to overall points. But you can't go wrong with a lot of these Zenyatta players on these teams that play 2 games this week. Izayaki is still going to be in discussion, even if his Transcendence usage is maybe a little bit more off or not quite getting the same amount of healing value as opposed to some of the other ones. So I have to say, like, for the options that we have 2 games from, it does offer some variety in regards to your starting lineup, but for the most part, we all seem to be honing in on the same people outside of maybe that flex tank position.
Yeah. Outside of Envy, make sure you start Envy. Other than that, it kind of, at least that's me. I don't know. That's me talking. But I would say start Envy, and then flex tank number 2 is where we're trying to figure out who to start.
Well, just don't pick Bishu because we know he's not playing.
Yeah. Poor guy.
Totem, before you close out the show, I wanted to let everybody know something that's going on highnoon.gg right now. Matt's recently added in the ability to look at your previous week's matchup scores. And there has been a lot of things that are inaccurate and don't match up. So what I want everybody to do is make sure you go and look at those. If something's not right, join the highnoon.gg Discord and let the staff know what's right and what's wrong. Because like right now, I'm sitting at 0-3 in our Overwatch League network. One, and Ramses is sitting at 3-0, but it appears that I beat Ramses week 2, which would put me at 1-2 and him at 2-1. But he's in the process of trying to figure out which is wrong, the numbers or the display on the website. So if you guys have anything that also Ed and I faced off this last week, but according to the site, I won the game, so Ed's not 3-0. Sorry, Ed. Let's just hope that's the case. But it could be either or. He's trying to figure it out. He has everything saved, so eventually it will all be correct. But make sure and help him out by joining the Discord and letting the staff know what's appearing correct and what's appearing incorrect.
Yeah, that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And just as a reminder, in regards to this upcoming schedule, there's going to be a lot of fluctuations in regards to the amount of games that are being played, not only this week, but also in week number 5. So this week, in the first couple of days, you're only going to have 3 matches as opposed to 4. So the start time is going to be a little bit later. Well, technically it's not later, it's just we're normally starting when the second match would be starting. So for those first couple of days, expect Overwatch League to get on, 90 minutes when it would normally be on prior. But outside of that, the week after is the travel week, and all bets are off at that point. Who knows what the state of fantasy is going to be? There might be a lot of panicking, getting waiver wire picks, and it'll be interesting to see how many players out there are going to make major moves, or if they're just going to stick to one or a couple, just because they don't want to kind of hamper how they're going to perform in the following week. So it's going to be interesting to see how the bye weeks are to come into play. But I do quickly want to note, Ed is not here, but I'm just looking at what he posted in the Discord. And he did want me to note that this past week, Surefour was benched for the Gladiators because Decay became 18. So we saw him debut, had a very strong performance fantasy-wise in game number 1 when the Gladiators were facing a Spitfire. And he was actually out-damaging and getting more kills than Prophet at the time. Now, in game 2, it was like a tale of two Decays. He did not put up the strongest performance, so it's going to be interesting to see what way the Gladiators are going to lean towards, whether they're going to start Surefour or whether they are going to start Decay. We also got to see a lot of Rascal playing over Architect for the Shock. And the main tanks put up a little bit stronger numbers this past week. And outside of that, looks like that is a majority of what Edenar wanted to say. And I know he's going to want to say it just because, he's not here to flaunt going 3-0. But you know what? I face him next week, or this week, in our Overwatch Network one. So hopefully I'll have a one.
I wish he would have been here to flaunt it, because it would have been hilarious if it turned out he actually wasn't 3-0 once the numbers got fixed. So I'm crossing my fingers that I won. Crossing my fingers.
I know it's weird because, when I look at it right now, it was showing that, it shows those scores that my players who I have starting, right now would have gotten that week, I think. I don't know. The numbers are still, a little bit messed up. So make sure to contact Matt and get him on the horn. He's super great about just reaching out to people if you talk to him. So we would more than encourage you, just get the dialogue going. The other thing to remember is, for next week, when we go down to 8 games and only a certain amount of teams are playing, make your pickups for week 5 this week right now, because when it comes around to next week and you need to find somebody who's even playing, who will give you a goose egg on your team, they're all going to be gone by the time if you wait till week 5. So I'd heavily encourage you, go now, make your free agent pickups, start stockpiling for week 5, because those away games are going to make fantasy a lot different.
Unless, it's unlimited league, then you're not going to have to stress as much.
For standard leagues, my bad.
Absolutely. All right. Well, with that being said, guys, let's go ahead and close out the show. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best ways to do that is to go leave us a review over on iTunes. I know there was a little bit of a delay for our reviews to actually pop up, but they were there. So when I was checking iTunes, it wasn't displaying the reviews underneath the art cover, what normally would be, but when I clicked on the review tab, it was actually showing them there, which I thought was kind of weird. But we do have 2 new reviews, so I promised that I would read them off tonight. So the first one is a 5-star iTunes review from The Devonator, who says, "Big fan of the show. Fantasy is such a cool thing for Overwatch. I get a lot of tips from the show for my picks in the Hanzhou Spark Community Unlimited League. Notice Ed bragging about being top 10. I'm second, probably because I played Ruckus, Winky Face, Go Outlaws. So, Julian, it seems like you found the third Outlaws fan out there.
The Redemption Tour!
Our podcast.
The Ruckus Redemption Tour!
It's still going on, so we'll see whether or not he can maybe string together a win or 2 for the Outlaws, or if he can only put up fantasy points. We'll have to find out. But we also have a 5-star iTunes review from The Choice BNB, who says, "Been listening to this since episode 1, and I love it. Got into my first ever fantasy sports league, and the info these guys have put out there is solid and proven. Plus, the guys are fun to listen to. Check it out." All right, guys, thank you so much for the support. And, it's still really early on. We're still fleshing some things out. So if you guys have any feedback when it comes to the format, anything like that, please let us know. But I do have some network news in the fact that we're continuing to expand. So, obviously, this is still a new podcast, but Overwatch League Network is adding a Contenders Overwatch podcast to our network, which should be starting up here very shortly. And that is something that, if you're a London Spitfire or New York Excelsior fan, you've probably heard this terminology said on the broadcast at some point, and that is hack the planet. So we haven't really covered contenders on a regular basis since July 2018 when we had the Batcap. That was one that I hosted alongside Ren. And this one is going to be hosted by some of our friends who write for the Overwatch. So you have Sayarnak, Ryu, and Draydan. And that's going to be doing deep dives into the NA, EU, Korea, and Chinese contender scene. And I know they set up a Twitter, so you can find them at HTP_podcast. So looking forward to seeing what they do. And we hope you guys enjoy the coverage that they are bringing in. And it's going to be kind of interesting, too, for me, just because, like, I'm a little bit more hands-off with this one. But, you know, I have full faith in these guys. They've been doing awesome work with the articles they've been writing. And honestly, I don't have the time to watch multiple regions of contenders, especially with Overwatch League on. It's impossible.
Totem can only do so much, guys.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have time to watch them either, but it sucks because I've met so many contenders, commentators, and casters. Like in the last few weeks, I've been collecting people from broadcast.gg, like just adding them to my collection of people that I've met. It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely go support the Path to Pro scene. And I know like there's a lot of changes with them like kind of going away from LAN outside of playoffs and these inter-regional competitions. So we have seen a little bit of changes in regards to how things are broadcast. Now like all the players have like the face cams. And I know there were maybe a couple of issues with some of the audio, but the talent is very rich. And we saw like the North America scene expand this year for contenders, where we now have 2 regions of North America, which is awesome to see. So you're seeing a lot of these trials teams coming up and seeing how they fare against some of the teams that have been kind of having a stranglehold on contenders. So we're going to see the gap between, you know, tier 2 and these upper echelon tier 3 team. So be sure to check out Hack the Planet when it is up on podcatchers. And when it is up, I'll be sure to let you guys know. But outside of that, Bob,
Totem, hold on. Can you say Hack the Planet like Sombra does?
I can't.
Julian?
I cannot do it.
I don't think I can. Bob, can you do it?
I don't think I can either, but I'll try. Hack the Planet. Nope. Fail. But at least I tried.
Well, I stick with where my strengths are, Bob. So
I can do a lot of accents, but not that one.
Maybe next week. But anyways, Bob, you know, we do have a great tool out there for people to find additional Overwatch content. So why don't you tell them a little bit about Overwatch Recall?
Oh, you talk about Overwatch Recall. Overwatch Recall is a place where you can find anything Overwatch pertaining to podcasts. I mean, anything. Path to Pro, Overwatch League, Overwatch Basic, anything that you want. You can find a listing at owlnshow.com/OW Recall. It's an episodic listing released every Sunday night. It will keep you up to date with everything. If you want to follow it on Twitter, you can follow it at OW Recall.
You have to say, too, like, ever since Overwatch League started up again, there was a time during the off-season where maybe we were averaging, like, 18 to 20 podcasts releasing on a regular basis. And this past week, we were up to, like, 31 podcast releases in a week.
Woo!
So, like, definitely with Overwatch League back, we've seen an expansion on the competitive esports podcast coming out of the woodwork, which is great to see. And there's definitely a little bit of everything for everyone, so definitely go check out Overwatch Recall. But outside of that, Ramses, we have a number of different ways how our listeners can get a hold of us, so why don't you let them know how they can do that?
Of course. So you can email us at contact@owlnshow.com. Our website also is www.owlnshow.com. Our YouTube, which of course I know Spider's putting out some great content for that, is at www.youtube.com/C/Overwatch League Network. I know the link cuts off. It's a little weird. And then Of course, please join our Discord at Owl and Show. Our Twitch, of course, where you're seeing us stream live right now, is twitch.tv/Owl and Show. We're a Twitch affiliate, so help support the show by subscribing to us and earn our network emoticon. We stream pretty regularly. I know we have Owl and jeez, I'm sorry, guys. We have Overwatch League Network. We have Heroes Never Die, and occasionally we have host streams on Fridays, but Overwatch League is happening, so we're pretty busy watching all the games. So yeah, we're on Twitch as well. We air Overwatch League Network Monday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Owl by the Numbers Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Time. Heroes Never Die, which is our variety Overwatch podcast hosted by Totem and our missing Ednar, unfortunately, at Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific Time. And like I said, host streams occasionally on Thursdays and Fridays at 7:30 Pacific Time. Also, please, if you feel so inclined, join our Patreon at patreon.com/owlnetwork. We recently launched our network's Patreon page for those that want to support our Overwatch network further and to help us develop. Tiers start at just $1 a month. And I just want to send out a special thank you to Daniel Fago on becoming our latest patron. We really appreciate your support, and we think about it all the time. Thank you so much for supporting us.
For just $1 a month, you can make a difference in these podcasters' lives.
For $1 a month.
Yeah, we don't have the really sad music to play in the background when you say that, so it doesn't quite get the full effect, Bob, unfortunately.
I think I made my point clear.
You did. I do quickly want to note, guys, tomorrow on Heroes Never Die, we are celebrating our 150th episode, which, I mean, honestly, like, we're almost at the point where it's been 3 years since we started that podcast, and yeah, we've had our ups and downs, but, you know, Ed came on like episode 100, and it's been pretty much nonstop ever since, and, you know, it's just been a pleasure doing that.
You know, even had a 12-year-old on it for a few episodes.
Yeah, someone that was younger than Sugar Free, just because, you know, Sugar Free does regress in age. So, you know, that is definitely important to note.
Have you talked to him recently? His voice has changed. It's weird.
I have talked to...
it's weird.
And I remember being in one of the game nights, and the Squid was in it with me, and I heard someone talk, and I didn't recognize what the Discord name was at the time, but I was like, holy shit, that's Squid? Like, it was pretty off guard, which is great to see. You know, our Squid is growing up, but definitely join us tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific Time on this channel to celebrate our 150th episode. And, you know, of course, join in on the shenanigans over in Twitch chat. But guys, let's start with Edinar and how we can actually reach him. You know, he's not here, but you can find him on Twitter at Edinar Overwatch. You can also find him on our Discord talking trash about being 3-0. So I look to put an end to that in the Owl Network fantasy this upcoming week. But Ramses, how can our listeners get a hold of you?
You can hit me up at Twitter, at Ramses_OW, where I have the advantage of being able to spell check and actually write out my words so I don't stumble and stutter and trip over myself all the time. So,
well,
yeah.
That doesn't mean that, you know, you're not going to send out a tweet and then delete it immediately.
I mean, that's true. That could, but I can delete it immediately. I can't delete what I say here on Twitch online for the rest of my life. It stays here. It gets clipped. It gets shown back at me.
Yeah, just like your green hat.
It didn't show up at all, unfortunately.
All right, but Bob, how can our listeners get a hold of you?
You can find me and everything I do on Twitter at Blazin_Bob. That's BLAZZIN_BOB. What about you, Totem?
Getting timed out for posting a link because I don't have him as a mod. But anyways, I am on Twitter at TimelyDrunkCTR. And guys, just as a reminder, I did guess on our recap this morning alongside Blaze and Bob and I Play Games, who had to abandon me midway through the podcast. But definitely go check that out. Join us tomorrow for Heroes Never Die. And I hope you enjoy the games this weekend for the Overwatch League. Best of luck with your unlimited drafts. Choices seem pretty obvious, and we hope to see you guys soon. Have a good night.
Later.
Burn.